Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. And if people pop in, they can pop right in and catch up. So, we just want to start off by doing some introductions. We want to get to know who's in the room here, and we want to make sure that you know who you're talking to. So, what I'm going to ask is that everybody just give their name, the school that they're working with, and the content or grade level that they teach. And then we'll go ahead and dive into the content. So my name is Drea Aguirre. I am a digital coach. I support primarily secondary schools. Go ahead and just pop off mute when you are ready.
Good morning, I'm Kaylee Paraccia. I also am a digital coach that primarily supports secondary schools.
Good morning, I'm Sharon Colbath from TJ. Most of my teachers are actually here. So I teach high school chemistry, mostly 10, 11, 12th grade.
Hi, I'm Angie Jacobson. I am also at TJ with Sharon and Jill and Scott and Laura. And I teach physics and earth science. So I teach all grades 9 through 12.
I'm Scott Bates, also at TJ. I teach freshman earth science.
I'm Jill Griffin, also at TJ. I teach physics and physical science. So it's mostly 10th through 12th graders.
I'm Michael Mealy. I am not at TJ. I'm actually at Home Elementary, and I teach mostly math for 5th graders.
Good morning. I'm Jamila Lutness. I teach at Coons Miller Creative Arts Academy, and I teach 6th and 8th grade science.
That may be everyone. Did we get everyone?
Yep, I think we got everyone.
Awesome.
I'm pretty sure. Actually, Laura, have we heard from you this morning?
Yeah, she dropped it in the chat.
Perfect.
She's also at TJ, and she's teaching 10th grade bio and 12th grade anatomy, and her mic is on the fritz.
Awesome. We have the TJ crew here this morning, along with Home and Coons Miller. So we're going to go ahead and get started here.
So in our whole group session, just before we popped into here, we named 2 key action steps that we were going to take to ensure that we are starting the year off building relationships strong in our classrooms. So the first key action step is taking a look at individual student learning preferences, their strengths, challenges, based on their experience and culture. So some things that we're going to do to address that key action step is we're going to look at Teacher Portal to pull some reports, keeping in mind that, raw data pull is just one aspect of your learner. And then we'll look at other digital platforms to survey our students, to see how they like to shape their classroom environment, and also platforms for students to collaborate and co-create norms for the classroom. Yes, we have a link to the slides in the chat, but I will throw that in again. And then we are, section 2, where we're at, is starting on slide 30. And then for key action step 3, we're looking at creating routines, strategies for students to share out about themselves. So again, we're going to be looking at some surveys and identity exploration assignments through digital platforms, and then also different ways to build community, not only with your students, but also with parents and caregivers in the community. So the first thing that we're going to do is ground ourselves in a little CRE connection. Over the summer, myself and a few other teams across DPS were able to read Start Here, Start Now by Liz Kleinrock. She has an incredible social media presence as well, where she posts a lot of resources, not only theory, but also takeaways like worksheets and student work examples. So really great concrete takeaways that she provides not only on her social media page, but also in her book. So we're gonna just start off taking 5 minutes to read an excerpt from her Start Here, Start Now. And thank you, Drea just dropped that link in the chat, but you can also find the link by clicking the image of the article in the slide deck. So as you're reading, just want you to kind of start thinking about your own expertise and experience in the classroom. What have you done to build community and relationships at the beginning of the year? And did anything from this article particularly resonate with you or your experience in the classroom? So let's take about 5 minutes to ground ourselves in this article and reflect on our own experience. We'll meet back at 8:29. So as you start to wrap up reading the article, let's come back into the main meet space and share out some of your own field experience. You guys are the experts and probably can generate better insight than an article can. I'll get the conversation started. As a white educator, I was working in Southwest Denver for 5 years and was not living in Southwest Denver, just like the article named, and I didn't look like my students. One of the conversations that I found most joy and learning from was just asking my kiddos, like, what are you doing on the weekend? What do you enjoy about your neighborhood? And having them tell me about their favorite restaurants on Federal Boulevard. And I would go there for lunch or for the weekend and just talk about what I ate, and their faces would light up. And it was just a nice shared experience that I could engage with them. But I would also love to hear about what resonated with you guys and your experience.
I teach chemistry, and in the labs, the kids are all in their different little groups, and I love going around and talking to them about, as it said, like, do you work after school? Do you play a sport? And because in a group environment, they get kind of shy and stuff. But if I walk around during labs and actually talk to them, I really enjoy that. And then, like, if they play a sport, then the next day I said, how'd the game go? And so they realize that I do care and stuff. And I really enjoy that a lot. It's not something I'm faking. I just think it's neat to know a little bit more about your students.
Sharon, I love how you're using like super authentic conversations with your students to get to know them, because it's really genuine. And those like natural conversations that happen as you're walking around, they're so much more personal than like what we have them do at the beginning of the year sometimes with the surveys and like drawing about themselves, because like you're taking an interest in them. So that's amazing. Please keep that up.
So I used to work in New York City, and it's hard to like live in the same community because a lot of the times like the schools, at least in high schools, are not really neighborhood schools. Kids kind of come from wherever. But I did notice when moving to Denver public schools, I live in Denver. I live like 10 minutes away from TJ. So a lot of my students are like near where I live. So I've noticed like a real difference in like how you can relate and like talk to the students about like, you know, just what they're doing around or what they're doing in town compared to when you're like living out of the community. Like even just on a day-to-day, it makes a huge difference.
Scott, do you ever run into them like grocery shopping? And I used to work with middle schoolers, so they would always be floored that I did not just like live my entire life at the school and that I would go outside of the building. Does that happen to you?
Yes, actually, all the time. One of my former students works at the King Supers that is like the King Supers I go to, and then another works at the Chipotle that's around the corner from my house.
It's strange as this seems, didn't realize the impact of being an educator of color would have on my students. I'm 100% authentic with them and explaining my background. And I always go to at least one of their games, which makes a huge impact for them.
Going to games is so like prime and important. I remember my middle schoolers like watching middle school sports is a challenge. There's not a lot of points that happen, but like to see them get excited that somebody that they know is in the audience, like it's awesome. So if you have the opportunity and you have the time, like going to their games can be a huge thing, and then pointing it out the next day.
Also, thank you for naming the importance of acknowledging your own identity and building relationships with students. That is such an important first step in knowing yourself and then being able to build those relationships from there. So thank you for naming that. Anybody else want to share out before we move on? And thank you, Laura, for sharing about seeing your kiddos at work. It's really cool to see them as professionals and students and athletes, and they have so many other identities than just students in our classroom. So for the structure of our session today, it kind of just depends on how you prefer to work, and you can identify that as we move forward. If you would like to follow along with us and kind of go through the slides step by step, watch us demo a few of these tools, then you can just stay in this room and follow along with us. But if you're somebody that likes to work independently, each of these slides have linked resources within them. If you want to just do your own self-inquiry and exploration, if you just learn best on yourself, if that's the case, we just ask that you come back into our own Google Meet. You can like mute this tab or mute the computer. Just come back at 9:10 because we're all going to share out on the tools and takeaways before we go back into the main room. So if you want to follow along with us, feel free to stick around. But if you prefer to work independently, you are more than welcome to turn your camera off and mute your computer while you go through this slide deck. And if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat box or come over the mic as we're going through our presentation.
All right, I also did drop that session 1 additional materials and resources document in the chat. So if you do want to work independently, all of our materials, resources, tutorials, examples, templates, that's going to be on that slide or the doc that I linked there. So definitely check that document out before you get rocking and rolling. But to start, we want to get to know our students a little bit. And if we can do that before they even walk in the classroom, that's awesome. Now, what I will say is that we want to take these as what they are, which is a little picture of what our students actually are. So we can know what their reading scores are. We can know how they score in math, and what their old SLO scores were coming into us, and that can help us differentiate materials when they come in to make them be as successful as they possibly can be. But we also need to keep in mind that that's a really limited snapshot of who our students are as human beings. So that's the only caveat that I want to throw out there when we're talking about pulling all of these reports from Teacher Portal. And as we get into it, you'll see that there's a massive amount of information that you can pull on students, but we don't want to form complete pictures of our students based off of this snapshot of data. Again, can be super helpful when we're trying to build small groups at the beginning of the year, before we really know our kids' styles and learning progression, but definitely not them as an entire human being. So Teacher Portal is chock full of reports that you can use to get some of these snapshots of where your kiddos are. It's super underutilized in DPS. So we just wanted to take some time to make sure that you knew what it was, how to access, and some of those reports that you can be pulling. We're not actually going to go through the Teacher Portal system click by click, but if you have never used Teacher Portal before, it's been a couple of years since you've used it, you would just want to brush up on some things. We do have this video here that walks you through accessing, downloading student lists, how to find those lists. But like, if you can look at this GIF here, all of these are different reports that you can run. Again, it gives you a whole lot of snapshots about your students, where they are, how they're doing in different aspects of their educational career. So we have a couple of reports that we think could be helpful for the start of the year if you are super overwhelmed looking at that list. I know that when I first pulled it up as a teacher, I was like, I don't even know what to start looking at right now. So we've cut it down a little bit with the reports that could be the most helpful at the beginning of the school year based off of the age level that you teach. But I want to hear from y'all. Have you ever pulled teacher reports from Teacher Portal? Or have you ever pulled reports from another platform that have helped you to shape the student experience? IC is another one for student reports. I used to get down the rabbit hole of the behavior tab in IC, which can be some entertaining reading sometimes. But again, making sure that we're looking at those snapshots. And yeah, there's tons of reports on Teacher Portal that are just not known about.
So I was in Bear Valley in Southwest Denver, and we had a high MLE population. So every year at the beginning of the year, our ELD teachers would walk us through pulling the student data list, where we could look at access scores for each of our students, not only like their total access score, but it broke down their reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills, which was really nice to see what kind of supports my kiddos might need prior to them entering into my classroom. But again, that is just a number. You get to meet your kids, and it's a whole different ballgame.
Jamila, you said that you've used Elluminate to pull some of those reports from kiddos. Can you speak a little bit to like what, because Elluminate is another huge beast of like, you can pull all of the information under the sun. What kind of reports are you pulling from Elluminate?
So generally when I'm using Elluminate, I'm just using test reports on their test data just to drive my instruction.
Awesome. Elluminate does have some hearty reports on those tests that they take. Anybody else pulling information about their students, specifically like around the start of the school year, to get a picture of what they're coming in with?
So on Thursday in our school, our data person compiles all of our data for all the teachers, and then we are to, as teachers, we're to cut and paste our own students, and we kind of make our own template of our students. So we actually do that. We started last year, and we'll be doing that again this year on Thursday. I forgot the man's name, but John Poole gets this guy to put all the data on one document, and then as teachers, we have to go in, and what it does is it forces us to actually look at it. I mean, he could obviously set it up for each of us, but then do you really look at it? I don't know who the data person is, sorry. John Poole is my contact, and he asks somebody to get our data together. And then we, as a individual teacher, compile our own into a spreadsheet, and then we can sort it based on the different data that we're interested in. Like ELA level is always a big thing, trying to figure out, can these students read at this level, and do they need extra supports, as somebody was saying earlier. And so it's very, very useful. But again, I like the idea that we don't actually hand the teacher, the teachers have to actually go in there, get their students' data, and then make their own spreadsheet, and then they can sort it based on that. So we'll be doing that Thursday.
Awesome.
No, I love that idea too, that they have to, all the teachers have to go through and like pull their specific data, because then like, you're right, they actually look at it, especially this week is so much information and so much that you have to do before students come in. It's easy for things to fly off the radar. Sharon, I wonder, like, what do you find the most impactful in these reports, at least from last year, when you're planning your instruction for the, the first few weeks of school and you're pulling those reports? Like, what are you really honing in on those?
So I'm old school. I actually have a grade book, and so I'll kind of take notes on that and put it in my grade book. So then as I get to see their data, then I'll look and say, oh yeah, their ELA score was like a 1, or their special ed, or their math. And just I'll like I said, I have an actual grade book, and so I'll take notes in there. And so while I'm grading things, I'll look in there, because the spreadsheet's quite a bit of data, as you know. And so I just take notes about the things, but mostly ELA level, math scores, especially chemistry, things like that. But I don't let it influence me. I look at it as I'm working with them, so then it reinforces, oh, that's why that's, and then I'll try other strategies with my students. But there's a lot, but special ed, the 504s, anything that, everything that I think would be of interest, but mostly math, ELA level, and the special ed 504.
It sounds like you're using that for some really awesome differentiation, and to create some additional supports for your kids. So
It helps
wonderful. Keep it up.
understand
The
that.
rest of your TJ team can go to you for inspiration when you're doing this on Thursday. But if you're going through these reports at any time and you're confused on the data, or you want someone just to pop out, sit next to you as you're like pulling this, and you want to know what to pull, you can always reach out to your digital coach, and they are more than happy to work with you through this process or any ed tech process that you have.
So that takes care of the raw data side of our students. And now the majority of our kind of strategy is just going to be focused on using some tech tools to get to know your students as humans. So one way that I like to start off the year is just by creating a survey for my students to gauge their preferences for learning, what they're coming in comfortable with as their strengths, what they identify as areas that they'd like to see for growth. So we're gonna have you all engage in, just some meta survey right now. We have a quick Google form for you to fill out. And based on Liz Kleinrock's guiding questions at the end of that article and some of her other excerpts from the book, there's just a few basic indicators for you to self-evaluate your own community building in your classroom. And then based on your responses in this Google form, that will help you identify for the rest of our session how you would like to move forward based on the areas of need that you identified for building community in your classroom. So we'll take about 3 to 5 minutes for this Google form. And when you're done with the form, we'll just do a quick whip around and share what next steps did you identify for building community in your classroom. So we'll meet back at 8:50. And if you can't get access to the Google form, please let us know, but it's in both slide 38 of the deck and also in the chat. We have about a minute left for this Google form. Does anybody want like an extra minute or two? Just let me know in the chat. If not, we'll move on in about a minute. All right, before we move on to kind of your independent exploration of some tools, we'll just do a quick whip around. That last drop down question says, how would you like to improve your instructional practice through building relationships? There were a few kind of options in that area, and I'm not sure if you guys, are you still able to see those options? If not, I can drop them in the chat. But if anybody wants to share what their next step is, come over the mic and we'll do a quick whip around. And okay, it looks like the form's closed. Let me just do I'll copy some of the drop-down options. So option one was pulling student demographic data from Teacher Portal, using surveys or forms to learn about student interests, sharing about yourself and your identity, providing space for students to share about themselves and their identities, inviting in families, communicating with families, using community building activities to learn about students, and then providing time and space for students to create their norms. Just come on over the mic if you want to share, and then we'll move on in a few minutes.
I'm not quite sure what you want. I selected the get the families more involved. I want them to know like what we're doing in the classroom and that they can get access to it. I even I do Schoology and I record the lessons so then the parents can actually go on and view the lessons. And I use Schoology also, like they have a questionnaire. I use the Schoology one instead, where you can have them I ask my students questions. So Schoology we were forced to use it during COVID, but I wish I'd used this years ago because it has those questions. But again, I record my lessons, and so then a parent can come on and watch the lessons and see what was going on. I want them to know what's going on.
That is amazing.
Yeah, Sharon, you can just come back and teach the differentiation module for us.
Yeah.
I've been teaching a few years.
So thank you for sharing your next step, Sharon. You guys each named your next steps, and Drea and I curated a bunch of examples and tools based on the next steps that you named for you now to explore through the next slides. So slides 39 through 42, we're gonna just preview them real quick with you guys to show you the tools that are included, and then we will give you the next 15 minutes to just explore a tool of your choice. So the first slide is about building relationships. There is a bunch of resources for you to give surveys to kiddos. So those take place in Google Docs or Google Forms. So learning style, do kids prefer to stand up, sit down? Their interest area, what they like to learn about. Expression style, do they like to write or create? Goal setting, beginning of the year survey, and then there's a link for names and pronoun surveys as well, which I find helpful at the beginning of the year. You can also look at how to get students to explore their own identity through identity maps. You can use a Google Draw where kiddos copy and paste pictures. You can also just use a few different identity maps as well. It looks like I might just need to update the links. It looks like the hyperlinks are a little wrong in those explanations, but we'll get on that. And then the last thing is family communication. If you want to look at different examples of newsletters to families, Sharon's amazing in posting videos. I think that's an amazing example as well to communicate to families. But if you're looking for a newsletter, there's a few examples on creating a newsletter as well.
So some of the other topics that we're going to allow you to explore is creating norms with your students. And so the first thing I just want to hit on is that there's a difference between classroom rules and classroom norms. So rules are your non-negotiables. Like, this is it, it's set. It could be like your school-wide policies, anything that, like, I know that my school, it was really big on like first 10, last 10, nobody's in the hallways. And like, that's not my decision to make. Like, that was a school-wide policy. So like, that's a really good example of like a rule. So that's what we're all doing. No questions asked, no negotiation here. But then you have norms and a social contract. So norms are these co-constructed expectations for how students and teachers and other, like anybody who's in that classroom space, they're going to thrive. So how are we going to have a respectful, safe, calm, productive environment? And that's going to look different for every class because there are different people in every class. And so co-creating these with your students can be super impactful. And it really gives them ownership over, you know, hey, we all agreed to this collectively. I didn't stand up here and tell you what to do and how to do it and when to do it. Like, we came together as a class and said, these are what's important to us, and this is how we're going to learn in this classroom. So what we want to focus on is how can we use tech to collect these norming ideas. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. All of them, of course, come with pros and cons. But the first is Pear Deck. So we can use Pear Deck, which is a Google Slides add-on. And what we like about Pear Deck is that students are able to interact with the slides. They can use text or drawing or multiple choice to show their opinions on things. But when they're projected up on your board, it's anonymous. So it's not that their name is attached to it and, you know, they feel angsty over, like, you know, speaking up or speaking out about things, especially at the beginning of the year when you don't have those relationships built with other students and with you. It can be really helpful for them to have that anonymity to really like fully participate and feel comfortable with it. But on the back end, you can see all those names attached to it, just in case you have a student who, you know, has an answer that you want to follow up on, you know what student gave that answer. The thing that, you know, we would love if Pear Deck included, but they don't right now, is there's no way for a student to put in an idea and have other students upvote it or say like, yep, I really like that, I really agree with it, besides like them putting it in writing. Another thing that you can do is you can use Flip. So Flip is the new Flipgrid. They just got rid of that grid part. It's a video platform app. So students can record their answers orally through video. We know that there's this huge rush of students interacting with short video clips. So if we can incorporate that into our classroom, it feels authentic to them. TikTok is like one of the #1 used apps this year. So they know how to record themselves. Flip makes it super easy and engaging for them to record, re-record, edit, put stickers on there. My kids always have a blast with Flipgrid. And when you upload those responses to the shared grid, students can like responses, they can comment on responses. So it's a great tool for them to like be able to engage with each other and their other ideas. The only thing is that, like, again, you'll have to write those answers down afterwards. You can't just like export all of those comments and stuff. And then we've got 2 Google products that you can use. So Jamboard, that's going to be something, if you have not turned that on in your school, it's a little bit of a process to get that turned on. You can work with your digital coach on that. But when it is turned on, the answers are displayed automatically. You can use stars or icons or GIFs to upvote things, but unless you are explicitly telling your students, like, write your name on your response, there's no way for you to track which student contributed to a response. And then Google Docs, that's going to be your most familiar platform for most students and for most teachers. You can also like force copies. This is really good for reflection. If you want to give students an opportunity to, kind of think through what's important to them before they have this class-wide conversation, you can use a Google Doc for that. But it is a little bit harder to collaborate with an entire class of students in one Google Doc without it getting really confusing and messy. So based off of all of that, you can choose all of these if you wanted to, but you can choose what's going to work best for you in your classroom to be able to pull these ideas from students about what they need to feel successful in their classroom. And then I will say that on that additional resources doc, there are a couple of templates that would allow you to have your students reflect before you start these conversations. And it also highlights not only like what are their actions and what do they want to see from their peers, but also like what do they need from you as the teacher or other adults who are in that classroom space in order to thrive and feel successful. And that also puts the onus on everybody, not just them or you. And then when you have all of those results, you decided as a class, this is what's really important to us. This is what we're going to live by in this classroom for this year. Of course, you can go and revisit that throughout the year. But if you want to display that somewhere in your room, or you want to display it somewhere on Schoology, you want to like make it so that it's a PDF available at all times to not only your students, but to families and guardians who can access that, you can use Canva or Google Slides or whatever other tool you would like to use. But we're really highlighting Canva and Slides here. Canva is going to make you like some really high quality professional looking posters. But there's a lot to it, and it can be really overwhelming the first time you get into Canva because there's so much. We don't even have to worry about the free version anymore because DPS has signed an agreement with Canva. We now have educator licensing for the whole district. So you unlock all of these super cool fonts, features, and you can collaborate on posters multiple people at a time. So we don't have to worry about like the free restrictions of Canva anymore, which is really awesome. If you need help getting that set up, please let us know and we will make sure that you have all of your educator accounts. And then slides. Slides are pretty familiar. Most people have used slides at some point in their life. If they haven't used slides, they've probably seen a slide deck before. But there aren't as many templates available. There's not as many like flashy components to make things super pretty, but it'll get the job done with what you need it to do. So with that, we want to give you, how long did we say, Kaylee? So about 10 minutes?
Yeah, let's come back at 9:13 to share.
So we're going to give you about 10 minutes just to explore some of these resources, go through tutorials. If you have questions, you want to bounce ideas with Kaylee and I, we're here to answer all of your burning questions. But at 9:13, we're going to come back And if you can just drop in the chat, like what you're planning on doing from this session, that would be awesome. We're also going to have another whip around when we join full group, but we just want to know what you're working on, what you're going to like highlight in your room, and how this is going to impact your instruction. So go play, have a blast. We'll be here with any questions that you have.
And the identity maps are updated on slide 39.
Loving all of these commitments here. I cannot wait to check back in, see how this all went for y'all, or how you're continuing to roll it out in our next session. But we are going to go ahead and pop back over to the main room now so that we can close out and, you know, have an optimistic closure to our session. But thank you so much. Y'all were amazing in this session. Super full of participation, especially for 8 o'clock in the morning. So snaps to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, if you need anything at any time, please, please, please reach out to your digital coach. But we'll see you back in that main room.
Thank you all.
And Kelly, what I actually found was a timeout thing that said that I didn't select the responses from the drop down, but I thought at least I got there, so I should be able to do it again.
Okay, just feel free to chat me or email me if you have any questions about that.
Thank